I found a teenage boy crying his eyes out on a park bench. He told me his older brother was a monster who made his life a living hell. I comforted him, a complete stranger. An hour later, I walked into my fiancé's house to meet his family for the first time. Before we get to that incredibly awkward first meeting, I'd love to know, what city are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments. And be sure to subscribe for more news stories every single day. Okay, let's head to that park. My fiancé, Alex, was by every conceivable measure a perfect man. He was handsome, charismatic, incredibly successful in his career, and he treated me with a kindness and a devotion that I had only ever read about in novels. Our relationship was the one true, uncomplicated joy in my life. And today was the day I was finally going to meet the family that had raised such a wonderful man. "You're going to love them, Hannah," he had told me on the phone the night before, his voice buzzing with a happy, confident energy. "My parents are the best, and my little brother, Leo, well, he's a teenager, so he's a bit moody, but he's a great kid. They are so excited to finally meet you." I was excited too, but my excitement was tangled up in a thick knot of nerves. The world of his family was a world away from my own humble upbringing. They were wealthy, they were powerful, and from the stories Alex told, they were the perfect, tight-knit, all-American family. I, a quiet kindergarten teacher, felt a deep, profound pressure to make a good impression, to prove I was worthy of their golden son. I arrived in their beautiful, tree-lined neighborhood about a half hour early, my hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. I decided to wait in the small, immaculately manicured park at the entrance to their cul-de-sac, a perfect little jewel box of a park, with a duck pond and a single winding path. I just needed a moment to breathe, to calm my frantic heart before the big performance. It was on that path that I saw him. He was a boy, maybe 14 or 15, sitting on a secluded bench overlooking the pond. His shoulders were shaking with a grief so profound, so absolute that it seemed to create a physical aura of sadness around him. He was crying his eyes out, his face buried in his hands. My first instinct, the one conditioned by a lifetime of not wanting to intrude, was to turn away and walk away, to give him his privacy. But my other instinct, the one that had made me a kindergarten teacher, the one that could not bear to see a child in pain, won out. I approached his bench slowly, cautiously. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Are you all right?" He looked up, his face startled, and quickly wiped his tear-streaked cheeks with the back of his hand. His eyes were red-rimmed and full of a deep, weary sadness that seemed far too old for his young face. "I'm fine," he mumbled, his gaze dropping to the ground. "You don't look fine," I said gently, sitting on the far end of the bench, giving him his space. "I'm a really good listener if you want to talk about it. If not, I can just sit here and be quiet with you. Sometimes that helps too." He was silent for a long time. I just sat there watching the ducks on the pond, letting the silence be. "It's my brother," he finally whispered, his voice a raw, broken thing. "My older brother." I waited. To everyone else, he's perfect. He's charming, he's successful, he's the golden boy. My parents think the sun shines out of him. They don't see what he's like when they're not around. He looked at me then, his eyes full of a desperate need to be believed. "He's a monster," he whispered. "He doesn't hit me, not usually. It's the things he says. He makes me feel small, worthless. He calls me a failure, a disappointment. He tells me I was a mistake. And the worst part is, my parents, they just laugh along. They think he's just toughening me up. They don't see that he's breaking me." My heart broke for this boy, this complete stranger. I knew this story. I had seen this kind of quiet, insidious bullying in my own classroom. I spent the next 20 minutes just talking with him. I told him that his feelings were valid. I told him that he was not worthless. I told him that he was a strong, brave young man for even being able to talk about it. I gave him some simple, practical advice, the same I would give to one of my own students. I listened. Finally, he took a deep, shuddering breath and stood up, a new, fragile resolve on his face. "Thank you," he said,
and his gratitude was so profound, so genuine, it almost made me cry. I really needed that. No one has ever listened to me before. He gave me a small, sad smile. I have to go home now. We're having a big, perfect family dinner. My brother is bringing his new fiancé over for the first time. I have to go play my part. I watched him walk away, my heart aching for the secret pain he was carrying. I looked at my watch and realized, with a jolt, that it was time. Time for my own perfect family dinner. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and walked the short distance to my fiancé's beautiful, imposing family home. Alex opened the door before I could even ring the bell, his face a picture of warm, loving excitement. "There you are," he said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of his familiar, clean cologne. "I was just about to send out a search party. You ready to meet the family?" I smiled back at him, the face of my perfect, loving fiancé, and pushed the sad story of the boy from the park to the back of my mind. "I'm ready," I said. He led me inside, his arm wrapped around me. His parents were just as charming, just as welcoming as he had promised. The house was beautiful, the atmosphere was warm, and I smiled, completely, blissfully, and foolishly unaware that I had just spent the last half hour with the one and only person in the world who knew the terrible, ugly truth about the man I was about to marry. I walked up the stone pathway to the grand, colonial-style house, the words of the sad, sweet boy from the park still echoing in my heart. I felt a profound sense of pity for him and a surge of gratitude for my own good fortune. To have a fiancé like Alex, a man so kind, so confident, so clearly a product of a loving and supportive family, I knew how lucky I was. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and rang the bell, ready to finally meet the people who had raised the man of my dreams. The door was opened by Alex himself, a brilliant, warm smile instantly spreading across his face when he saw me. "There she is," he said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of his familiar, clean cologne. "I was just about to send out a search party. You ready to meet the family?" I smiled back at him, the face of my perfect, loving fiancé, and pushed the sad story of the boy from the park to the back of my mind. "I'm ready," I said. He led me inside, his arm wrapped around me. His parents were just as charming, just as welcoming as he had promised. The house was beautiful, the atmosphere was warm. I smiled, completely, blissfully, and foolishly unaware that I had just spent the last half hour with the one and only person in the world who knew the terrible, ugly truth about the man I was about to marry. I walked up the stone pathway to the grand, colonial-style house, the words of the sad, sweet boy from the park still echoing in my heart. I felt a profound sense of pity for him and a surge of gratitude for my own good fortune. To have a fiancé like Alex, a man so kind, so confident, so clearly a product of a loving and supportive family, I knew how lucky I was. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and rang the bell, ready to finally meet the people who had raised the man of my dreams. The door was opened by Alex himself, a brilliant, warm smile instantly spreading across his face when he saw me. "There she is," he said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of his familiar, clean cologne. "I was just about to send out a search party. You ready to meet the family?" I smiled back at him, the face of my perfect, loving fiancé, and pushed the sad story of the boy from the park to the back of my mind. "I'm ready," I said. He led me inside, his arm wrapped around me. His parents were just as charming, just as welcoming as he had promised. The house was beautiful, the atmosphere was warm, and I smiled, completely, blissfully, and foolishly unaware that I had just spent the last half hour with the one and only person in the world who knew the terrible, ugly truth about the man I was about to marry. I walked up the stone pathway to the grand, colonial-style house, the words of the sad, sweet boy from the park still echoing in my heart. I felt a profound sense of pity for him and a surge of gratitude for my own good fortune. To have a fiancé like Alex, a man so kind, so confident, so clearly a product of a loving and supportive family, I knew how lucky I was. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and rang the bell, ready to finally meet the people who had raised the man of my dreams. The door was opened by Alex himself, a brilliant, warm smile instantly spreading across his face when he saw me. "There she is," he said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of his familiar, clean cologne. "I was getting worried. Come on in. They're dying to meet you." The house was as perfect as I had imagined. It was elegant, but not stuffy, filled with art, books, and large, happy family photographs. In the living room, his parents, Robert and Cynthia, rose to greet me. They were exactly as Alex had described: charismatic, warm, and welcoming. "Hannah, at last," Cynthia said, taking both of my hands in hers. "We have heard so much about you. Welcome to our home." "It's a pleasure to finally meet you both," I said, the knot of anxiety in my stomach finally beginning to loosen. They were wonderful. My fears had been completely unfounded. The next hour was a blur of easy conversation and warm laughter. They were brilliant hosts. They asked me about my work as a teacher, and they seemed genuinely interested. They told charming, funny stories about Alex's childhood, stories that painted a picture of a happy, boisterous, and deeply loving family. They were, in a word, perfect. "Of course," Robert said with a theatrical sigh, "it wasn't always easy. Raising two boys is a challenge. Alex was always the easy one, the golden boy, so driven, so responsible. And our younger son, Leo," my mother-in-law, Cynthia, added, her voice softening with a kind of maternal, pitying affection. "Well, Leo is our artist. A bit more sensitive than Alex. Very deep, very moody. He's been having a bit of a difficult time lately, so please forgive him if he seems a little quiet." "He just needs to toughen up a bit," Robert said dismissively, though his tone was not unkind. "Alex is always trying to be a good role model for him, a strong older brother, but you can only lead a horse to water." My heart ached with a sudden, strange sympathy. A sensitive, artistic boy with a perfect older brother he could never live up to. It sounded so much like the boy from the park. "Speaking of which," Alex said, looking at his watch, "he's late, as usual. Leo," he called out towards the grand sweeping staircase. "Get down here, my fiancé is here. Stop sulking in your room and come say hello." I smiled, ready to finally meet the last member of this perfect family. I heard a door open upstairs, followed by the sound of slow, reluctant footsteps on the stairs. I turned, my polite, welcoming smile already in place. And then, the world stopped. The boy who walked into the dining room was not a stranger. It was the boy from the park. His hair was a mess from where he had been running his hands through it. His eyes, the same deep brown eyes I had looked into just an hour before, were still red-rimmed and puffy from crying. He shuffled into the room, his gaze fixed on the floor, the very picture of a child weighed down by a sorrow too heavy for him to carry. He looked up, and he saw me. The color drained from his face, his eyes widened in a look of pure, unadulterated, and terrified shock. He froze in the doorway, a deer caught in the headlights. He was trapped in a room with his tormentor, and with the one and only stranger in the world to whom he had just confessed his deepest, most painful secret. My own face, I am sure, was a mask of equal horror. The pieces of the puzzle, the two separate stories of my afternoon, slammed together in my mind with a sickening, catastrophic force. The charming, successful, perfect man holding my hand under the table. The monster older brother from the park, they were not two different people. They were one and the same. The blood in my veins turned to ice. The warm, happy dining room suddenly felt like a cold, airless tomb. I was sitting at a table with the family I had so desperately wanted to impress, but they were not the people I thought they were. They were the enablers, the audience for the quiet, insidious torture of their own child. And I I was engaged to the monster himself. No one else seemed to notice the silent, horrified exchange between me and the teenage boy in the doorway. "See what I mean?" Alex said to me with a low, amused chuckle, squeezing my hand. "Come on, Leo, don't be rude. Say hello to Hannah." Leo just stared at me, his face a mask of pure, pleading terror. And I, a woman who prided herself on her honesty, on her compassion, on her love for children, did the only thing I could do in that impossible moment. I smiled. A fake, brittle, and utterly false smile.
"It's so nice to finally meet you, Leo," I said, my voice a stranger's in my own ears. He just nodded, a single jerky movement, and shuffled to his seat, his eyes never leaving mine. Alex squeezed my hand again and smiled at me, a perfect, loving smile that did not reach his cold, dead eyes. And I had to force myself to smile back, my heart a block of ice in my chest. He thought this was the perfect family dinner. He had no idea I was now having dinner with a monster. And the only question left in my mind was, what in God's name was I going to do about it? I walked into the dining room on my fiancé's arm, a polite, frozen smile plastered on my face. The room was beautiful, bathed in the warm, golden glow of a crystal chandelier. The table was a masterpiece of my future mother-in-law, Cynthia's, impeccable taste, set with gleaming silver and fine china. It was the very picture of domestic bliss, of family warmth. To me, it felt like a beautifully decorated execution chamber. I took my seat, my hands trembling slightly in my lap. Across the table, the boy from the park, my fiancé's younger brother, Leo, shuffled into his own chair. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared at his empty plate, his face pale, his shoulders hunched, a small, terrified island of misery in a sea of his family's cheerful chatter. My heart ached for him. My fiancé, Alex, the man I had believed to be the kindest, most loving man I had ever known, took his seat beside me. He squeezed my hand under the table, a gesture that was supposed to be comforting, but now it felt like the cold, possessive grip of a stranger. "Isn't this nice?" he whispered, his warm breath on my ear. "My two favorite people, finally meeting." The irony was so profound, so absolute, it was almost paralyzing. I could do nothing but nod and smile, a perfect, silent doll. The dinner that followed was the longest and most excruciating hour of my life. I was a witness to a slow-motion crime I had previously been blind to. Alex was a master, a virtuoso of quiet cruelty. His bullying was not loud or obvious. It was a series of 1,000 tiny, paper-cut insults, each one delivered with a charming smile, each one designed to go completely unnoticed by his adoring parents. When my future mother-in-law, Cynthia, asked Leo about his recent math test, Alex had jumped in before the boy could even answer. "Oh, Leo gave it his best shot, didn't you, buddy?" he'd said with a loud, cheerful laugh. "We can't all be blessed with a head for numbers. That's why I'm the one going into finance, and Leo is our little artist." He had tousled his brother's hair, a gesture that looked affectionate, but I saw the way Leo had flinched, the way his shoulders had hunched even further. It wasn't a joke. It was a public declaration of his brother's inferiority. Later, when Leo had been reaching for the water pitcher, his nervous, trembling hand had knocked over his glass, sending a spray of ice water across the pristine white tablecloth. "For God's sake, Leo," Alex had snapped, his voice a sharp, ugly whip crack in the cheerful room. "Can you do anything without making a mess? You're 14 years old. Get it together." "Now, Alex, be nice to your brother," his father Robert had said, but his voice held no real authority. It was the tired, rote admonition of a man who had been watching this same scene play out his entire life. And with every small, cruel act, with every dismissive comment from his parents, I felt my own heartbreak for myself begin to cool and harden into a cold, protective fury for the terrified child sitting across from me. I had come into this house loving a man who did not exist. The charming, perfect Alex was a fiction, a mask he wore for the world. The real Alex was the monster from the park, and his family, with their willful blindness, had allowed that monster to flourish. I knew, in that moment, that just breaking up with Alex was not enough. It was too quiet. It was too easy. It would allow the lie of the perfect family to continue. It would leave Leo alone, trapped in this beautiful, sunlit prison with his tormentor, his situation made 1,000 times worse by my departure. I had promised that boy in the park that he wasn't alone, and I would not break that promise. I had to do something. I had to expose Alex, not just to me, but to the parents who had refused to see him. The plan began to form in my mind, a desperate, dangerous, and beautiful idea. I would use my own voice, the voice of a kindergarten teacher, a voice they would see as gentle and non-threatening, to set a trap. I waited for a lull in the conversation. I turned to my future mother-in-law, my expression a perfect mask of gentle, professional concern. "Cynthia," I began, my voice soft, "I was hoping I could ask for your advice on something. A situation with one of my students at school. It's been weighing on my mind." She immediately preened, her favorite role being the wise, benevolent matriarch. "Of course, dear," she said. "Tell me everything." "Well, there's this young boy in my class. He's a sweet, sensitive, artistic child. And he has an older brother, a boy who, by all accounts, is a perfect golden boy. Smart, athletic, popular." I watched Alex out of the corner of my eye. He was listening, a look of detached amusement on his face. "But this little boy," I continued, "told me that his brother is a monster in private, that he belittles him, calls him worthless, makes him feel like a mistake. And his parents, they don't see it. They just see the golden boy. They think the older brother is just toughening him up. I don't know how to help him." "Oh, that's just terrible," Cynthia said, shaking her head with a look of profound and utterly false sympathy. It was Alex who took the bait. He let out a short, condescending laugh. "Honestly, Hannah," he said, using my name with a familiar, patronizing affection that now made my skin crawl. "It sounds like you're being a little dramatic. The kid is probably just weak and looking for attention. The world is a tough place. A little toughening up from an older brother is probably good for him. It builds character." His words, his own ugly, abusive philosophy, hung in the air. He had just, unknowingly, confessed to everything. Leo, across the table, was staring at his plate, his face pale. This was it. The moment. I turned my full attention to my fiancé, my expression no longer of polite inquiry, but of cold, hard, and quiet judgment. "That's a fascinating perspective, Alex. It's so funny you should say that." I paused, letting the entire table focus on me. "Your brother, Leo," I said, my voice never wavering, "told me almost the exact same story about his own monster of an older brother when I found him crying his eyes out in the park this afternoon." The clatter of my future mother-in-law's silver fork hitting her porcelain plate was the only sound in the sudden, dead silence. The perfect dinner party was over. The trial of Alex Miller had just begun. The clatter of my future mother-in-law's silver fork hitting her porcelain plate was a sharp, ugly sound that shattered the last remnants of their perfect family illusion. The cheerful, polite dinner party was over. The room was now a courtroom, and I, the quiet kindergarten teacher, had just become the star witness and the lead prosecutor all at once. A deep,
Profound and terrible silence descended upon the table. I watched as my fiancé Alex and his parents, Robert and Cynthia, exchanged frantic, panicked glances. They were trapped. Their carefully constructed narrative of a perfect, loving family demolished by a single, simple truth spoken aloud. My gaze shifted to Leo, the boy from the park, who was staring at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of pure terror and a tiny flickering spark of something I had not seen in him before. Hope. It was my mother-in-law, Cynthia, who recovered first, her voice a low, trembling hiss of pure, venomous rage. But it was not directed at her son. It was directed at her victim. "Leo," she whispered, her voice shaking with a fury she was trying to control. "What is this woman talking about? What disgusting lies have you been telling a complete stranger about your own family?" Leo flinched as if he had been struck. He hunched his shoulders and stared down at his plate, the small spark of hope in his eyes extinguished by the familiar, cold wind of his mother's disapproval. But he had an ally now. He had me. Before I could speak, his father, Robert, joined the attack. "This is a private family matter, Hannah," he said, his voice a low growl of warning. "You have clearly misunderstood a child's dramatic fantasy. You have no right to come into our home and make these kinds of wild, destructive accusations." They were doing exactly what Leo had told me they would do. They were closing ranks, they were protecting the golden boy, the predator, and isolating the victim. But it was Leo, my sweet, sad boy from the park, who finally, after a lifetime of silence, found his voice. It was not a shout. It was a small, trembling, and utterly heartbreaking whisper. "She's not lying," he said, his eyes still fixed on his plate. Every head at the table snapped in his direction. "I did meet her in the park, and I did tell her the truth. I told her that he finally lifted his gaze, his tear-filled eyes landing on his older brother, Alex, calls me a worthless failure almost every single day. I told her that he forgets to wake me up for my school bus so I get detention. I told her that he accidentally deleted my history paper from the computer the night before it was due. I told her that he tells his friends I was a mistake. And..." His voice broke, a single hot tear rolling down his cheek. "And I told her that you two you just watch. You laugh sometimes. You let it happen." He was crying openly now, a 14-year-old boy finally speaking his truth in the face of his abusers. With his own brother's testimony now corroborating my story, Alex's perfect, charming facade finally, completely, and spectacularly shattered. The mask fell away, and for the first time I saw the real man I was engaged to. The monster from the park. His face was a contorted mask of pure narcissistic rage. "You pathetic little snake," he screamed, his voice a raw, ugly thing that made his own mother flinch. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his little brother. "You run off crying to a complete stranger, a woman you have never met, and you tell her lies, disgusting lies about your own family?" He then whirled on me, his eyes now two burning coals of hatred. "And you come into my home, you eat our food, you pretend to love me, all while you're plotting to turn my own family against me? Who in the hell do you think you are?" I did not flinch. I did not cower. I just looked at him, at this stranger, this cruel, empty man, and I felt nothing but a profound and deeply liberating sense of pity. "Who am I, Alex?" I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through his rage like a surgeon's scalpel. "I'm the woman who found your 14-year-old brother sobbing his heart out on a park bench because his own family makes him feel like he is worthless. I'm the woman who, for the past year, you have lied to every single day, pretending to be a good and decent man, while you were a cruel, vicious monster to the one person in this world you were supposed to protect. I stood up then, my movements calm and deliberate. I placed my napkin neatly on the table. "And now," I said, my voice final, "I am the woman who is walking away from this beautiful, perfect, and completely rotten lie you call a family." I reached for my left hand, and with a single smooth motion, I slid the heavy, diamond engagement ring from my finger. It had been his grandmother's. It was a symbol of his legacy. I placed it deliberately on the table, next to my half-eaten plate of food. The light from the chandelier caught in its facets, sending a spray of brilliant, cold light across the table. "I believe this belongs to you. It seems it was given under false pretenses." I turned to leave. I walked across the dining room, my steps sure and steady. I reached the grand foyer, my hand on the doorknob, ready to walk out into my new, uncertain but honest future. But then I paused. I looked back. I saw Leo still sitting at that terrible table, looking at me, his face a mixture of terror and a kind of desperate, dawning hope. He was still trapped. I looked at him, and the final words of my time in that house came to me. "Leo," I said, my voice clear and strong, a promise and an invitation. "If you ever need a safe place to stay, a place where you are respected and believed, you know where to find me." I walked out of that house, the sound of the heavy door clicking shut behind me, a definitive, final punctuation mark on the end of my old life. The cool night air was a welcome shock after the suffocating, toxic atmosphere of that dining room. I got into my car, my hands trembling, not with fear, but with the last vestiges of a profound, righteous anger. I did not drive far. I pulled over to the curb at the end of their dark, quiet street, just out of sight of the house, and I waited, my heart a wild, frantic drum in my chest. I had left him an open door, a lifeline. The only question now was whether he had the courage to swim for it. Every second that ticked by felt like an eternity. I was about to give up, my heart sinking with the thought that he was too trapped, too broken by years of their abuse. And then I saw him. The grand front door of the house was thrown open, and a small, frantic figure ran out, silhouetted against the bright light of the foyer. He was carrying a single, lumpy backpack. It was Leo. He ran down the stone pathway, not looking back, his movements fueled by a desperate, panicked energy. I started my car and pulled up beside him just as he reached the street. I pushed open the passenger door. He scrambled inside, threw his backpack in the back, and his entire body was racked with a storm of ragged, heartbroken sobs. "I'm sorry," he choked out, tears streaming down his face. I couldn't stay there. The second you left, they started screaming at me. They said it was all my fault, that I had ruined everything." I reached over and pulled him into a fierce, protective hug, my own tears now falling freely. "No," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You did nothing wrong. You did the bravest thing I have ever seen. You have nothing to be sorry for. For tonight," I promised him, and I promised myself, "you are safe." He stayed with me in my small, quiet apartment that night. The next morning, the expected phone calls began. They were not from Alex, my now ex-fiancé. They were from his parents. Their voices were a frantic, furious storm of accusations and demands. "You have kidnapped our son," his mother, Cynthia, shrieked. "We are calling the police. You have 5 minutes to bring him back." "No," I said, my voice as calm and as cold as ice. "I will not, but I will meet you in 1 hour. The coffee shop on Main Street. We will discuss this like adults. If you are not there, or if you bring Alex, my next call will be to Child Protective Services. I suggest you come alone." The hour that followed was the longest of my life. I left Leo with a trusted neighbor and went to the coffee shop. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was a block of granite. My former in-laws-to-be arrived. their faces a mixture of fury and fear. They began with threats. I let them talk. When they were finished, I laid out my terms. It was not a negotiation. It was an ultimatum. Leo will return to your home, I began, my voice quiet but unyielding. But he will not return to the home he left last night. His return is contingent upon a number of non-negotiable conditions. I looked them directly in the eyes. First, Alex moves out, immediately. He is an adult and he is an abuser. He will not live under the same roof as the brother he has been tormenting. He has until the end of the week to be gone. Their mouths opened to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing them. Second, the entire family, you, Robert, and Alex, will begin intensive weekly family counseling with a therapist specializing in emotional abuse. I will choose the therapist, and I will require written confirmation of your attendance. And third, I said, delivering the final, crucial condition, I will remain in Leo's life, officially, as his advocate and as his safe person. He will spend every other weekend with me, and he will have a new cell phone on my plan that he can use to call me or anyone else at any time without fear of his brother's supervision. I leaned forward. This is your one and only chance to fix the family you have so profoundly broken. If you refuse any of these terms, if I hear even a whisper of Alex's cruelty towards Leo continuing, I will take my audio recording of last night's dinner, along with Leo's own detailed and willing testimony, directly to CPS. The choice, I said, echoing a sentiment I had heard in a courtroom once, is yours.
They were trapped. Their fear of public ruin, of a formal investigation, was greater than their pride. Defeated, humbled, and utterly broken, they agreed to everything. Over the next year, Alex moved out, the therapy sessions began, and Leo started to heal. I watched as the anxious, frightened boy I had met on that park bench began to transform. He started to smile again. He started to paint, his talent, so long suppressed, now bursting forth in a riot of color and life. I ended my engagement, of course. My life was now my own, and it was entwined with the life of this incredible young man I had promised to protect. I hadn't won a new son. I had won him his own life back, within his own family. I had forced them to finally see the child they had always ignored. The story ends not with a victory, but with a quiet, peaceful moment of hope. Months later, I was at a local art show. On the wall was a beautiful, powerful painting, and standing beside it, confidently explaining his work to a small crowd, was Leo. His parents were there, in the background, watching him with a new, quiet, and for the first time, truly genuine pride in their eyes. I had lost a fiancé that night at the dinner table, but in doing so, I had gained a brother, and I had helped a broken family, my broken family, take the first painful steps toward finally, truly healing. An incredibly powerful and mature story about choosing to heal a family instead of just walking away. What a testament to the strength and compassion of the protagonist. This story had a complex ending. Do you think Hannah did the right thing by giving the parents an ultimatum, or should she have just taken Leo away for good? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you are moved by this story of a woman becoming a hero for a child in need, please show your support by hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more powerful and thought-provoking stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.